Major phone carriers make you sign contracts with rigid data plans to trap you into a kind of forced phonogamy. Sounds pretty insecure if you ask me. At Consumer Cellular, we believe in a more consensual and healthy form of phonogamy, free of contracts and more flexible to your data needs. This way, you stick around not because we force you to with contracts and fees, but because you love our phone plans. Like ardently love our phone plans. Phonogamously. Consumer Cellular. When freedom calls, we're here to answer. Call us at 1-888-FREEDOM.
Why don't more infant formula companies use organic, grass-fed whole milk instead of skim? Why don't more infant formula companies use the latest breast milk science? Why don't more infant formula companies run their own clinical trials? Why don't more infant formula companies use more of the proteins found in breast milk? Why don't more infant formula companies have their own factories instead of outsourcing their manufacturing? We wondered the same thing. So we made ByHeart, a better formula for formula. Learn more at byheart.com.
Welcome to Spotcast. This is episode 11. My name is Tim Mitchell, and I am in Toronto, Ontario, and I'm joined once again by Jaime Lopez Jr. in Seattle, Washington.
How's it going?
And also joined by Jonathan Kuline over there in Mississauga.
Over there.
Singing and dancing.
You got it.
All right, well, in tradition of our usual style here, let's do some fact check with Jonathan. So take it away.
Fact check. Okay, so this is for episode 10. We're up to date, so only a few things this week. 3210, last episode. The Borg kids, who first appeared in the 6th season episode of Star Trek Voyager, entitled Collective, are named Icheb, Mizotti, Azan, and Rebbe.
Oh, really? That's on Voyager. So Hugh, I remember one guy named Hugh that was on the Next Generation.
That was on,
right?
Yeah, that was TNG.
And so he was like a season or two before 7 of 9?
Several seasons, yeah, because TNG was over, and then Deep Space Nine, and then later Voyager. So yeah. Yep.
So did we ever have Borg on Deep Space Nine? I guess not, eh?
No, I don't know. How many did they do any Borg episodes? I don't remember any.
Recall a Borg episode.
I think the closest we got was Worf appeared on the Defiant in the Star Trek movie, right?
Yeah, I mean, I guess technically the pilot for Deep Space Nine, because it starts during the Battle of Wolf 359. More like
true.
A flashback than anything else.
Yeah.
I guess it technically counts as having the Borg there, but not like they had like a story of the week related to it.
Yeah, no running children characters or anything. So fact check 4511. The new Francis McDormand film that Tim mentioned, didn't premiere, showed at the Toronto International Film Festival, is called 3 Billboards Outside Ebbing, Missouri. I don't know how you didn't remember that name, Tim. That's
well, I remembered Billboards.
Yeah.
It's the Billboard movie.
The Billboard,
and what's the gist of that movie? Do you remember? Do you know?
I didn't. I looked it up. I must admit that one escaped my notice when it was here. So I caught the name, but I didn't really get into the details.
Yeah. I remember seeing it because it had an unusual title.
Yeah. Well, and Frances McDormand's always worth watching.
That's true. And that's I saw the title and I saw it was her, and then kind of made 2 and 2 together. And I think I saw a trailer for it somewhere, but I can't remember what it was about. Oh, well.
And 10215, the TV show that Tim was referring to as Guantanamo, is actually called Quantico.
Yeah. I actually did say Quantico, but you couldn't hear me. It was like drowned out. But yeah,
I couldn't. I must have had to look that one up. I remember seeing the commercials for it, but I never got a chance to watch that one.
So since we have Mr. Lopez on the show, Senor Lopez on the show, can we ask what Guantanamo and Quantico are those Hispanic names? You know,
Guantanamo probably is just given the way like Guantanamo Bay and where it is in relation to Cuba. I actually don't know about Quantico. I don't know. That sounds
Quantico's the FBI or CIA headquarters.
Yeah, I actually don't know. I'll have to look that one up.
If only
Isn't that where Alias takes place, Jonathan?
Quantico. Let's see. First thing that comes up is the TV series. That's never a good sign.
Nope.
What is the meaning of the word Quantico? Formerly Potomac is a town in Prince William County, Virginia, United States. Very helpful.
No,
I think
you're right. I think it's there we go. It's United States Drug Enforcement Administration's Training Academy, the FBI Academy, and the FBI Laboratory, the Naval Criminal Investigative Service. So it's headquarters for a lot of DC adjacent.
Right. Oh, it's in. Sorry, where did you say? What state did you say it was in?
Virginia. It's in
so it's right next door.
Right next next to Washington, D.C.
Yeah, DC,
so Quantico in that reference, I think it's a site of one of the largest U.S. Marine Corps bases called Quantico. Yep. It's also, home to the DEA Training Academy, the FBI Training Academy, the FBI Laboratory, Naval Criminal Investigative Service, the U.S. Criminal Investigations Command, the Air Force Office of Special Investigations Headquarters. So it's got a lot of stuff.
Right. Okay.
And now we know.
And so the last one, should I do the last one? Or you should do the last one.
Well, there's two. There's one from you and then one from me. So
I mentioned watching The Balance of Terror. I did actually watch The Balance of Terror, but I mistook it for what is actually called the Enterprise incident, which is where Kirk gets surgically altered to look like a Romulan. And as Scotty says during the show, you look like the devil himself.
Yeah.
And Spock and Kirk go over to somehow beam over to a Romulan ship, and the Romulan captain, who's female Romulan, tries to seduce Spock. Meanwhile, Kirk beams over and steals the cloaking device when he finds out where it is. And but The Balance of Terror was, I think The Balance of Terror was the first episode where we see the gentleman who played Sarek as a Romulan, and it's about, I think that's the one about the first time they kind of encounter the Romulans, and Kirk and the other Romulan guy do battle, as it were, right? So is that correct?
Yeah.
You guys think?
Mark Leonard, yeah.
Mark Leonard, that's it. That's what I'm thinking of. Yep. And of course, I can be totally wrong about The Balance of Terror again, so we'll have another fact check for next week.
There you go.
All right.
And the only other thing I noticed, one of the things we mentioned last episode was when Jabberwocky, the film you had reviewed for us as a pick a couple weeks ago, Jabberwocky is going to be released on the 21st of November, 2017.
Cool. Yeah, I think that's the first time Criterion has done their special frame-by-frame scanning and retouching, right?
Like I said, the bathroom scene will be all worth it in frame-by-frame restoration.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
True. Yep. There you go. Cool. All righty. So let's move on to the follow-up. So Jaime, you have a follow-up item here for us?
Yes. During Disney's quarterly financial call, their CEO announced a couple things. One is that the Last Jedi director, Ryan Johnson, is going to be helming his own Star Wars trilogy, which will be completely separate from the Skywalker saga.
Right, yeah.
And they're also going to create a live-action Star Wars television show, surprise, surprise, for their upcoming online streaming service.
Is it going to be called Battle for the Planet of the Apes?
I would not bet very much money on that, but the odds are probably, pretty good on the payout for that if you go that route.
Right.
Put a penny down and become a billionaire, that sort of thing.
Oh, true. Yeah. Cool.
And they also announced they're going to do an exclusive Marvel series, but they haven't said what it is yet.
But it's going to be exclusive.
Oh, I missed that.
It's going to be exclusive. They announced they're going to do another Marvel series a la Netflix, but they're going to do something of their choice, and it's not in cooperation, obviously, with Netflix going that route.
Did they talk at all about continuity with that? Will it be in the same continuity as the current Netflix series?
No, I think that one got lost. I think it did for you as well, Jaime. I think it kind of got lost in the shuffle. Everyone was like, Star Wars TV series, new trilogy, and I think
shiny.
Yeah, exactly. I think everybody just sort of glommed onto those things, and they were able to slip that in. And I think a lot of people are just now catching up and going, wait a minute, did they say Marvel series? So I think we're waiting for some details on that one.
Cool. I had a follow-up item here from Inner Space, which is the TV show we talked about on Space Channel, which covers some things on things coming out. Right now they're doing a Justice League week of special interviews and things like that. But they talked about Inner Space. Teddy, who had been I think he was in Asia filming some shows. They have a show called Mighty Trains where they talk about these really cool trains that, still are in business. If you're into trains, maybe if you're like Sheldon, you might want to check that show out if it's online. I'm not sure. But anyway, he's back. So they were talking about this current series of Star Trek Discovery. And a couple of things that they mentioned was that they think that Lorca, because of the way he kind of acts bizarrely, may actually be from one of these multiverse, alternate universe kind of things that they talk about. I think in the last episode of, was it the second last episode we saw when Lorca reveals to Stamets? By the way, spoilers for those of you who haven't watched any of the Star Trek Discovery series. Was it last episode that they talk about where he reveals to Stamets the fact that he's got this map of the jumps?
Yes, that was on the most recent episode. Yep.
Oh, that was most recent. It wasn't the second one. And so, much like our Jonathan here thinks that Ash may in fact be a spy.
Well, especially after this week.
Well, let's look into this. So they think he may be a sleeper agent, which may be interesting too, because if he's been tortured, maybe there's going to be like a Manchurian Candidate kind of thing happening at some point, right?
Oh, we'll get right into that. Don't you worry.
Okay, all right, cool. The next bit of follow up was one of my picks was Star Trek Continues. I think Vic. I'm going to mess his name up, and Mignogna. I'm going to go with Vic Mignogna. Vic Mignogna, who looks like William Shatner of that time. He's a fan who's put together a show called Star Trek Trek Continues, for those of you who didn't catch the previous episode where we talked about that. But they expounded on it, and they had some interviews with Teddy and AJ Fry, talking about the fact that the idea behind Star Trek Continues, which has just ended with a double episode, was to fill in the gap between when the series was canceled because it never was able to reach closure, I guess, up until the first movie, the Star Trek the movie. So that was what this is what the whole thing does, and they've got some really cool characters in there. In fact, they have a woman who's dressed as the Romulan commander, which I just talked about a few minutes ago, and she's like, I had to do a double take. She was, she looked that close to the original actress who played that role. And a gentleman named Rob J. Sawyer was who they picked to write the stories for this series of shows. I guess they went and sought out a couple of writers to write this thing, and he was the one that was picked. And he said, if nothing else, his whole life is about writing a closure to the Star Trek original series. So he's now met his goal, I guess, right?
It's pretty cool.
Yeah. So, and it's, they act in the same way and they dress in the same way as the original series. So kind of like just closing off those missing pieces, I guess.
Didn't they? Right. I thought they did a series of books that sort of took place in that time span, didn't they?
Yeah, you may be right, because I know I've read a number, and it gets a little blurry after a while, because I've read a bunch of Kirk stories, and there's a couple of Spock stories. DC Fontana and people like that had written a few of them that I've read, and they sort of there's a story where Kirk, as a young cadet, is not Jonathan Archer. Who's the other guy? Robert April.
Yep.
Robert April was the first captain of the Enterprise that Kirk eventually takes over. There's a story about him as a young cadet serving on that particular voyage, and there's a bunch of other ones. And there's, How Much for This Planet is a great sort of send up. It's sort of a farce, if you will, but with all the usual suspects like Scotty and Sulu and Kirk and McCoy and Spock as well, right? So it's kind of if you're into the original series characters, it's kind of an interesting book called How Much for This Planet. Yeah. So moving on, this is a piece from last week, which I should have. This came out the night we were recording last week. That Jennifer Aniston and Reese Witherspoon are going to be doing a series that's going to be hosted or sent out there by Apple TV, right? Which is kind of interesting. So I'll put a link in the show notes about this. I'm more interested in the fact that Apple is now getting into the sort of television streaming, and I did happen to have my Apple TV on yesterday actually, and I found that the Orville, in fact, is also being streamed on Apple TV, and it links in Canada anyway. It links to City TV and CTV and a few other places. So if you have those apps already installed on your Apple TV, you go to the Apple TV app, and it you find the show you want to watch, and if it's available for free streaming online through one of the services that you may be enrolled in, it kind of throws you over to that series. And Jaime and I would both know they're using deep linking to do that, so kind of a technical thing. But interesting that Apple TV. I wasn't sure that Apple TV was actually going to work in Canada, because a lot of these sort of services, like when Apple Radio came out, we didn't have it for like 2 years, and I'm surprised we have Apple Music.
Yeah.
Yeah. So interesting that Apple's getting more into this media streaming. I think the days of cable TV are coming to an end very quickly, I think, right?
Yeah. How long before they start charging extra for that?
Well, they already do charge. I think, what was I did find a couple of shows that I was interested in that were on there listed. So I followed down the rabbit hole to see where they went, and eventually got to the point where it's like $1.99 for an episode. Or Get Smart was on there. Get Smart. You remember the old Get Smart with Dawn Adams and what's her name? Number 9, Agent 99. Those are $1 or $2 a piece. You can't watch those for free, but they're on Apple TV, and I hadn't seen them anywhere else before, right? So I think don't we have DVDs of that stuff? Yeah. We do. Okay. Anyway, so that was a bit about Apple streaming. So did anybody catch the Electric Dreams preview that was the Philip K. Dick series that was broadcast last night?
Yeah, I did.
I did not know it was coming out.
It's not. It was a sneak preview. It's not coming out until January officially, right?
December. I think they're doing it on Christmas as a preview as well.
Christmas, yeah, right. Yeah, right after the Doctor Who Christmas special, they're going to show Electric Dreams. So the first episode was about, and we're not going to spoil it for you, Jaime, but the first episode was about with Bryan Cranston, which is the one they've been portraying. And I think the first episode that comes out at Christmas time is starring Steve Buscemi. But I just wanted to point out, call out these guys, because there's been a lot of talk about sexual harassment, and we talked about this last week in sort of in our after show, I think, or 2 weeks ago. But there was a scene in the show at the very beginning, Jonathan, I don't know if you remember it, but where Bryan Cranston forces himself on his wife, admittedly, it's his wife, but still in a very sort of
he's very physically aggressive with her, very intimidating.
Yeah. So I mean, I get that they're trying to convey that that's the character of the person, but they were doing it in other ways too. Like he kept interrupting her in meetings and stuff like that. Yeah. We're not giving away too much, Jaime, but I thought it was a little over the top that they, in light of the way things are going, that they would show that in a show. I think we should be able to move beyond that. I don't know.
I mean, I think they were trying to establish that this guy was a jerk and cruel to his wife in his way.
Right.
So, I mean, I didn't take it too hard that way, although you're right. I think like so many of these things, and one of the things I want to talk about later is the Punisher, but some of these things just hit you at the wrong time, and any kind of depiction now of intimidation or use of power over women is just going to hit the wrong spot pretty fast, given things are going on in society right now. So you're right. It definitely kind of hit a weird tone. The series is interesting, but it's funny because it's already been airing for a little while in the UK.
Oh, really? Oh,
yeah. It was a Channel 4 show first. It was supposed to be a Channel 4 and AMC, and then AMC backed out. So Amazon picked up the US rights, and Space picked up the Canadian rights. So there's already been 6 episodes. So actually, what we saw last night was episode 6.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Huh.
Or I guess 2 nights ago. They I actually watched it last night, but so yeah, it's funny that they started with that one, probably because, as you say, it's got Bryan Cranston in it and a couple of Game of Thrones actors. Liam Cunningham is in it.
Yeah, right.
For Davos, and Essie Davis was Lady Crane for a recurring role for a while on Game of Thrones too, and she was really, really good in this. I thought.
Is that the lead character?
The lead character, yeah, she was fantastic.
What's her name again?
Essie Davis.
And she was in Game of Thrones.
She was Lady Crane in the whole story with where they're in Bravos.
Okay. Yeah. I'll have to go back and see that.
Yeah. She was good on Game of Thrones, but I found her really captivating in that episode last night. She was really, really enjoyable as that character.
Yeah, she was definitely very good. Yep.
Mm-hmm. And so they're doing 10 episodes of that in that first run, and they're all standalone episodes, as you say, like a really impressive cast list of people that are coming up in these shows. So lots to look forward to there. It's going to be interesting to see what order they air them in from now on, though. I'm very curious because I knew
it's not like when have they ever done that where they showed a show out of order and kind of totally ruined it?
Well, but in an anthology, it doesn't matter that much, right?
That's true.
You may as well throw Bryan Cranston out there. I mean, that's your big gun, right? If you
your best foot,
throw out the multi Emmy award winning star of the biggest show of the last decade,
Right. Sure.
Yeah.
Cool. All right, you got something here about Justice League, or was this Jaime?
No, I threw a couple things in here that got me today. So the Justice League one, so they announced today that Justice League, the review score is going to be held off of Rotten Tomatoes until Thursday.
Oh, really?
And
is that bad, eh?
Apparently, the reason that they've done this, this is is a story from Gizmodo from IO9, which is a great blog if you get a chance to check it out. They had a story that apparently they're holding the review off because they're going to announce it on a new Facebook TV show that Rotten Tomatoes has.
What?
So it's called See It /Skip It, See It, Skip It, and they are going to delay the score on their website because they're going to unveil it on their new show, and then after it's been on the show, they're going to put it up on their website. Now, this comes amid a year wherein Hollywood studios have been going ballistic because numbers at the box offices are way down because people are actually using things like Rotten Tomatoes to aggregate whether or not they should spend their $15 on going to a movie theater. And
right.
So the timing of this is really interesting that they've chosen this week and this movie to do this launch of this, given that I think a lot of people are looking to see what the critical response is to decide whether or not they want to go and spend their movie money on a movie like Justice League, which, given the track record of Warner Brothers in the last couple of years, I think a lot of people are a little wary of.
Interesting.
Yeah. So just an interesting bit of timing, but I know I was, I read a few of the tweets from some of the preview showings they've had of it, and it's gotten, some positive. People said it's, better than you're probably expecting, and definitely better than Batman Superman. And, there's been some good vibes out there, but then some people said, like, it's still not not up to scratch compared to what some of their competitors are doing, and so it sounds mixed so far. But I was really curious about this decision making process, and it kind of is interesting timing with a movie like that.
Yeah, it's interesting. So let me ask you a sidebar question here. So and maybe Jaime can chime in on this too, because you probably followed along too. But so DC and Marvel, or Marvel as I like to say, they both have sort of their strengths and weaknesses in terms of characters and stories that they've had over the years. And I think I'm safe in saying that Marvel has done much better in the box office than DC has, right? I think you've told me that a number of times.
Oh,
right?
yes.
So how do you think, like in terms of those two, in terms of print, like comic books, are they comparable, or is one, or do people polarize towards one publisher or the other, or are you just split down the middle kind of thing?
Yeah, I think in the past, perhaps when I was a younger person, there was definitely an us and them. You were a Marvel guy or you were a DC guy. Some people were both. I started out as a big Marvel fan, and then over the course of time migrated my interest to DC. And in the end, I read significantly more DC books than Marvel over my adult life, I would say. But also that was because DC made a conscious effort to spread into areas like their Vertigo imprint that had books like Neil Gaiman's Sandman and Garth Ennis's Preacher and Warren Ellis's Transmetropolitan, and some of these books that are just, amazing works. Plus they published things like Watchmen and V for Vendetta, and just they went to some more interesting and more mature places, whereas Marvel sort of for the era in which I was reading books as a teenager was really focused on, a lot of superhero storytelling and wasn't really going in that direction. Things have certainly changed. They've had some marquee writers over the last 20 years who have done some really wonderful storytelling at Marvel. So now, I think there is certainly people who are avowed of one or the other, but I think there's a lot more acceptance of, I like comic books, and comic books are published by a ton of different companies.
Sure. Yeah. Of course, there's a lot of, smaller companies have had successul runs as well.
Yeah.
What do you think, Jaime? Do you follow comic books at all, or?
I haven't quite as much recently. I kind of went the opposite direction for sort of platform, if we want to call it that, publisher choice. I started as a young person with DC, and then as I got older, started finding Marvel a little more interesting. And when I'm looking up the stats here, it looks like they're just about neck and neck from some comic book sales stuff that I'm looking at. So
yep, they've leveled, and that took a long time for DC to climb back into that race because Marvel dominated for a long time.
Right. What about on the platforming? Since you used the P word here, what about in terms of games or gameplay? Marvel titles versus DC titles in video games. My favorite continuation of the Marvel versus DC rivalry has been the Lego titles. Believe it or not. Oh yeah.
So I know a couple of people who work in the industry, and I heard a great one person made a comment about. So they launched Lego Marvel Superheroes was a big title, and so they had over 100 different characters you could unlock and all kinds of different hidden characters and stuff like that. So the question that the DC executives had when they went into the next meeting was, what was the number that Marvel had? We want at least double that. And so they've actually started this sort of war back and forth between like who can expand their universe to the most ridiculous degree of, like, I want Howard the Duck. Well, I want Groot. Well, and they just started into these characters that, only huge comic nerds like me like or know. But darned if I wasn't sitting here playing these games with my son going, oh my God, I can't believe they had that character in there, to the most obscure random things that they've stuck into these games. So I must admit, I'm really kind of curious because Lego Marvel Superheroes 2 is coming out this sometime very soon. And so I'm very curious to see how far they've pushed that to that next level where this rivalry has taken them of having them, try and one up each other in the Lego games.
Yeah, I'm trying to rack my brain and think about, so I hadn't really considered the Lego games. That's actually really insightful. I can't think of a Marvel game or series that sort of matches the success that DC has seen with the Batman Arkham series.
Oh, so
Arkham Asylum, Arkham City, and whatever the final one was. Those did like fantastically well, and I can't even think of another sort of video game tie-in that has done quite as well from either publisher, irrespective of the Lego series.
Yep, and they also have done over this year they've come up with Injustice Part 2, so they've taken over into this fighting area with Injustice 1 and now Injustice 2, which gets all these great pits all these great DC heroes and villains against one another in head-to-head combat. So So you can play like a boxing match basically, or a wrestling match between these two, Batman, Superman, or Green Lantern, Aquaman, and Wonder Woman. Name the character, you can have them duke it out, which is really, really fun, and actually has a really good storyline behind it too. So it's not just a punch 'em up.
Right. So do they have their own unique powers? Like, does Batman throw money at people and stuff like that? Or?
Making it rain. All the characters have all their features. It actually is sort of set in this sort of alternate universe where there's a conflict between what traditionally would have been allies, and so you end up having these opportunities where heroes versus heroes, villain versus villain, and
so it's like a Jean-Claude Van Damme movie, in other words. Right?
Yeah, no, and it plays out in this very dynamic fashion, but it's really kind of cool to okay, I'm Catwoman, I'm facing Superman, how can I beat him? And so you have to sort of strategize and think about her strengths and weaknesses, and it actually makes for a really, really fun experience.
Interesting. Well, I guess it segues right nicely into Star Wars Battlefront II.
Oh yeah. So this is my favorite story of the day, and this was just today. So Star Wars Battlefront II launched this week, and highly anticipated game. For the last one was a really fun experience if you're an online gamer. Wasn't so much if you're a solo gamer, because they didn't bother including a solo campaign. This week, the folks at EA who developed the game have come under fire because apparently the way that they've built this game is that in spite of the fact that you pay $80, that's Canadian, to get the game, and that's for a basic version of the game. If you want the deluxe version, it's $100. You have to actually pay an extra fee on top of that if you want to play as prominent characters like Luke Skywalker and Darth Vader in the game.
Oh, really?
Or you can spend 40 hours playing the game to unlock those characters. 40 hours.
Wow.
So people went on the Reddit boards and were criticizing this justifiably, saying, hey, this is not cool. So somebody's comment was, quote, seriously, I paid $80 to have Vader locked. And EA, the community team at EA, replied to the post saying the paywall is meant to quote, provide players with a sense of pride and accomplishment for unlocking different heroes. As for the cost, we selected initial values based upon data from the open beta and other adjustments made to milestone rewards before launch. We appreciate the candid feedback and the passion in the community. Passion the community has put forth around the current topics here on Reddit, our forums, and across numerous social media outlets. Well, I don't know if you guys have spent too much time on Reddit, but they do have this karma system where you can vote things up and down. So the people on Reddit were not amused by this view of how the game was set up. And so the score right now, as of this afternoon, was minus 683,000. That is an all-time record for the lowest ranked post on Reddit. And there are just a scathing list of reviews, people saying this is a cop-out, and clearly this is done with money in mind. So the folks at EA have now announced they are going to lower the prices by 75 cents per character. In relation to this outcry of people who are disgruntled over this. I'm not sure what that makes the actual price on that yet, because I must admit I haven't even looked at the game yet. But apparently they have said that they will at least make this effort in dropping the price, but not before
by 75 cents.
75 cents per character, yeah.
But so that means Darth Vader is going to cost you 75 cents less than $40 or whatever it was.
Well, no, it was 40 hours, and I don't know. I'm just going to look it up here while we're chatting, and I'll slip that back in here. It was $80 to get the game, and then you pay extra to unlock the characters. But I don't know what the cost per character is here. Let me see if I can find it. But either way, I mean, justifiably, people are pretty peeved over this, and I must say, that was the highlight of playing. I played Battlefront 1, which I thought was again super fun. But the best part of it was walking through the Hoth ice caves, replicating the Empire fight scenes as Vader with a lightsaber in your hand, or as the Emperor with lightning bolts shooting out of your fingers, or as Luke, chopping the heads off of stormtroopers. So I could see why people would be pretty peeved not to be able to access those characters, especially after paying a pretty penny just to unlock the game itself. So
man, oh man,
yeah. I mean, it's one thing. I mean, we've kind of gotten used to this in the mobile world where iOS and Android games, freemium in-app purchase IAP laden games, they have these same kind of economics. But at the very least, they have the decency to not charge you for the game to begin with. And here in the, let me do my Jim Sterling, AAA game space where you pay $60 to $80 just to get in the door, you don't expect to like, nickel and diming happening to you. It's quite a disturbing trend, and I'm not surprised that this is the most downvoted Reddit thread of all time. I mean, we had an episode a couple episodes ago with the Orville, which was this very same topic, right? Like these guys are well on their way to being re-educated at this rate. So.
Yeah, brainwashed.
Yeah, and again, this is the trend in gaming, right? Is the you pay for a certain amount and then you can unlock more once you get deeper. And they did that with the last Arkham game you referenced, Jaime. They did, you can buy extra skins for your Batman costumes, you can buy upgrades for your Batmobile, you can do stuff, but there's that fine line between hey, you can unlock a skin to make your Batmobile look like the 1966 Batmobile, and oh, by the way, if you want to be Batman, you have to pay an extra price on your game.
Right.
So again, I think it was probably a poor choice to obviously put those kind of characters with that marquee name under there. Although again, from a business point of view, sure, it makes sense. People they're going to want to play those characters. You can have a look at whether or not people are interested in paying a premium price for it. Obviously, some people did, and I think what people were really ticked off about was the fact that so many people do pay that premium price. Right? They are fine with spending $25 or $10 or whatever it works out to. And I'm looking it up right now and I cannot find it. I'm looking out on the PlayStation Network and I can't find it. But people don't mind spending a few extra bucks, but not everybody wants to go that route. And not everybody has that kind of extra money. If they've saved up their $80 to buy the game, they don't necessarily want to have to throw in more money on these things. And so you get the freemium players and you also get the pay to players. It's the same thing as all these online games, the Clash of Clans and all that kind of stuff too. You get some people who are, trying to build something for nothing, and you get some people who are like, I don't care, I'll throw $500 at it and I'll unlock every level and every creature and every building and everything, right? So yeah, it's an interesting business model. It'll be interesting to see where these kind of things go, especially with this kind of backlash.
Sure. All right, well, I think what we should do is skip the next two things and just jump right into our main features, which are the two shows, right?
Sure.
Okay. All right, so we're talking about, and again, this is the spoiler warning. We're going to talk about episode 9, the mid-season finale of Star Trek Discovery, and we're also going to talk about episode 9 of the Orville, Cupid's Dagger. So, who wants to take off in covering the Into the Forest I Go recap?
I think it's Jaime's turn this week.
Is it? Okay.
Yeah, let me try my best here. So this follows this follows up from the previous episode where the Pavans, the planet / blue gas / crystalline structure, has sent out a signal that is trying to draw in both the Klingons and the Federation to come together, ostensibly for peace. Unfortunately, the Klingons don't sort of agree with that, and it opens up with Captain Lorca talking to Admiral Terrell about the situation, and he's ordered, quite frankly, he's like, look, your mission has failed. We wanted to use this to figure out the cloaking technology for the Klingons, and you need to hightail it out of there. We're not going to risk the Discovery on this sort of thing. And oh, by the way, we got a medal. Sorry, excuse me, not a medal. We got stuff going on that we need to take care of. And so he sort of acquiesces, but in his Lorca sort of way, he really doesn't. Rather than taking the short hop over there, he has a nice little conversation with Stam. It's like, oh, I guess you're not feeling that well, right? Like you're not feeling good enough to do a jump, huh? So why don't you go talk to the doctor and get that checked out? And we'll just go on regular warp factor 5 in this case to get back to Starbase 45, which conveniently will take them 3 hours to get there. And also means they have 3 hours to figure out how the heck are they going to solve this Klingon invisibility problem. And they come up with this scheme to do a couple things. One, they realize that they can do sort of like an iBeacon. What did I write here? They can put some iBeacons, or some Mac Pros, some 2013 Mac Pros on the Klingon ship, and then do a whole bunch
D-Link Wi-Fi interfaces.
Yeah. So that's an exactly great analogy there, where just like you might have somebody going and mapping out the Wi-Fi signal distribution in your office when they're trying to figure out how many access points do we need. The Discovery is going to do something similar, where they're going to do 133 jumps to jump around different coordinates around the Klingon ship while those beacons are giving off different signals, so they can haven't come up with some analysis of like, what does that distortion pattern look like? It's not a perfect cloak. It is something that has some holes in it. And this also means that they have to have an away mission to beam aboard and put these little beacons on there. And our golden boy, Ash Tyler, is of course selected as the security officer. And he pretty much pushes really hard to have Michael Burnham come along as well. And they do go on board, and I'd say they're pretty successful in that, right? They get on board, they put the first beacon, everything goes great. They've got these little, emitters of some sort, kind of like the Orville style, but not holographic, in that they can cloak themselves as being Klingon life signs rather than, two humans walking around. And when they're on there, they discover, oh, wait a minute, there's another human on here, which, hooray, it's the Admiral, and I forget her name.
Cornwell.
Yeah. Thank you. She is still on there. And as we talked about last week, we weren't really sure if she was dead. I don't think we really thought she was, because she probably would have been blown apart or some other sort of grisly thing. And here she is. She's not just fine, I would say, because she complains about not being able to use her legs. So she's probably paralyzed in some sort of way, at least from the waist down. And they find her in that room with all of the, dead Klingons, I guess. I forget why they were there. Yeah. And who else would be in there but Laurel, or L'Oreal, as I will call her at some point, I'm guessing. So I keep messing it up in my head. And Ash Tyler just completely breaks down. Like, he just has all of these PTSD style, shock style flashbacks of these terrible things that have happened between him and Laurel. And he's just shut down. So I think the Admiral stuns Laurel, if I'm not mistaken.
Yep.
Right. Yeah.
And Michael Burnham runs off to go put the other beacon in the bridge, I think, of the sarcophagus ship. And at some point, she uses the universal translator she has with her to figure out that the Klingons are like, oh, forget it. Like, we just can't beat the Discovery here. Like, this thing is jumping around like crazy, and we can't defeat it. Forget it. Let's just leave. So she buys them some time by openly challenging Cole, right? And says like, hey, what's up? How's it going?
Yeah. Here I am. I want to talk.
Yeah, and he berates her, and he brings up the point that Philippa Georgiou has been killed, and he's using her comm badge, or sorry, her actually it's not
her comm badge, yeah.
Just like a normal badge.
Yeah,
like his teeth.
Yeah,
and they end up fighting because she goads him into like, hey, I thought you had honor, and like, why don't we fight? And so this gives the Discovery some time, and it ends up being, I don't know, roughly a stalemate, I'd say. She survives long enough to get beamed out by the Discovery. Once they've done all their jumps, they've gotten all their data, they beam out. Yeah. Michael Burnham, Tyler has of course notified the Discovery that the Admiral is there, and in a Star Trek IV style fashion, Laurel jumps on top while they're being beamed out, and she also gets beamed over to the Discovery.
Yep.
Let me see here. Oh, and my memory escapes me. I just watched the episode like a day ago, I think.
And then they blow the heck out of the ship of the dead.
Oh, yeah. They do that immediately after. Okay, I thought there was like a scene I missed in my head. Okay.
Yeah. No. As soon as they beam them back to the ship, they target the ship because they can actually see right through the cloak. They lock on their photon torpedoes and blow it to smithereens and kill everyone aboard except for Laurel, who escaped.
Right. Yes. So this is where they get into saying, "Oh, okay, we're going to put Laurel in the brig." I think Michael Burnham and Ash Tyler have a little bit of a moment where
first kiss.
First canon kiss, I guess, right? Because the other ones didn't happen since they were alternate timelines, I guess.
Yeah.
Didn't he kiss her on the planet last episode, though?
No, I think they put their heads together, but I don't think they actually kissed.
Oh, okay. You're right.
Yeah.
So first kiss in this timeline, anyway, I guess, right?
Yep.
Yeah. And of course, Stamets and his boyfriend also have a snog as well.
Yep.
At one point. What's interesting though is they've done this 133 jumps, and that's like just about tore every fiber out of Stamets' body. He's like all messed up, like physically exhausted by the end of it, and the doctor's concerned that he's going to have a problem during it. And of course, in typical TV fashion, they say, well, all we have to do is do one more jump back to the starbase now that they've cleared all the conflicts out of the way. Why don't we just do one more jump? And all the time I'm thinking like, no, don't do that.
Yeah.
Because and this is a major spoiler for people who haven't seen the show, but they end up doing the jump, and of course it goes horribly wrong as it does, as you would expect, right? And Stamets is left on his back with his eyes all up in the back of his head or turned white or whatever, and they don't know where they are. They have no star pattern that they can grab onto. So we're left with a sort of a cliffhanger for the next season, thinking are they in one of the multiverses, or they zapped themselves somewhere else, similar to what Deep Space or similar sort of Voyager did. Yeah, so it's
Lost in space.
Yeah, exactly. Where's Dr. Smith? Danger, Will Robinson.
Danger, Will Robinson.
Yeah, that was one of my favorite shows.
Lorca definitely goads Stamets into doing this, because this is the part that I got confused with in the conversation with the Admiral before, where they're like, oh, the Admiral's going to be okay, she's going to make full recovery, which is obviously bad for Lorca. And oh, by the way, we got this Medal of Honor for you. Why don't you come to our place and check it out? And I'm almost certain that's a trap, because I'm sure the Admiral at this point, if she had enough sense left, she certainly told Starfleet about what Lorca's been up to, and he goads Stamets into like, well, we'll just warp normally, it's fine, it's cool, you don't need to push yourself, and kind of convinces Stamets to be like, oh yeah, well, we should do one more jump because it'll be safer. What's one more jump? 133, and then that'll be my last hurrah. I'll retire from jumping.
Right.
Yeah, he's gonna take his boyfriend to see the opera.
Yeah.
Right.
And he being Lorca interferes in some way, and it happens so fast I couldn't see on screen, and I didn't pause it to see what exactly he did. But he tinkers with the coordinates, or
does he?
Yeah, he flips up something on the bridge, and he clearly enters a different coordinate or something.
Oh, he enters in 1985, right?
Yeah, they've gone to go get the whales. It's going to be fantastic.
I was thinking about the Back to the Future.
Oh yeah.
Well, that's interesting. I'll have to go back. I must have looked away for a split second when that happened, right?
Yeah,
it was a split second, because it shows him looking down at his little like armrest panel, and he changes something, but I wasn't quick enough to pause it and see what it was he changed. But it was clearly intended to be like he did something bad here. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Clearly he interfered in some way, took advantage of Stamets doing one last jump.
Well, and of course, now that you say that, it makes perfect sense, because I'm thinking all along like don't do another jump, and then of course I'm not I don't have the evil plot in my head that says of course he's going to do one more jump, because then he gets to manipulate the outcome, because he's clearly not a
good guy.
He's not a good guy, but he's not a gambler in that sense. Like, he's going to play the cards he knows, right? So, and if he lets the Admiral go back to Starfleet Command, she's gonna do her duty and out him, right?
Yeah.
And of course, Stamets will go into a museum or get dissected or whatever he said would happen to him.
No, he said he was going to the opera. He's fine.
Well, he's going to go to La Boheme.
Yes.
Well, like they're like, like they're going to let him do that. Come on, seriously.
Yeah.
But interesting.
So lots of stuff to chew on in this episode, and I'm sure you guys have some different takes, but the one that I really want to go through is pertaining to my theory on what's going on with Ash, is when he goes through that PTSD episode, and they do these really fast cuts of what could be rape at the hand of L'Rell. It could be torture. It could be both, or maybe it's something else. And so, that scene where we see him suffering what appears to be PTSD, and then following that up when she ends up back on the ship and she's in custody, and he comes to see her and he drops to his knees in front of her.
Right.
There's a real sense of something happening there that is more than just, I was tortured by you, that clearly there's something deep connecting the two of them. And so what do you guys make of those kind of developments?
Well, it was kind of like the Patty Hearst syndrome, right? The part where you fall in love with your
Stockholm
character.
Syndrome.
Is that what it's called? Yeah. I thought it was Patty Hearst. Oh, well, I guess Patty Hearst had Stockholm Syndrome. Yeah. But interesting stuff. I mean, the torture thing obviously was pretty brutal, and of course, there was when he was having the dream near the end there, before he goes to see her, he sort of sees himself, in relations with her, if it can, right?
Yeah, we got some naked Klingondom in there.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
Yeah, this is a first. We've never seen them completely bared, even though the Dura sisters definitely pushed the edge.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, it was interesting, but again, I think, if you weren't convinced by my arguments before, and there's no end of this stuff on blogs and social media, people theorizing about what all this means, but I don't know. To me, this spoke to, it came back to the question of, what happened to what was L'Rell's lover lover's name, the guy who disappeared.
Volk.
So what happened to Volk? And
yeah,
I can't help but think that maybe we saw what happened to Volk right there.
Oh, really?
Yeah, that rather than it being like torture, because they play it early on as like, oh, he's screaming and there's like knives and all sorts of things. But then when you see more and more of it, and you take the alternative view, you're like, wait a minute, what if that's just like really brutal Klingon plastic surgery?
Yeah,
right?
And again, and she says before she leaves him, when he gets exiled by Cole, she says, you in order to win the battle you want to win, you're going to have to give up everything. And what better way is there for him to do that than to be stripped of his identity and sent as a deep cover agent to infiltrate Starfleet by taking the place of somebody they captured?
Yeah.
Interesting. Yeah. So this is the Enterprise incident all over again.
Yeah. I honestly, I had a feeling that was where this was going, but I think when we saw those scenes and the way they were really sort of cutting through it, I think Jaime's right. I think you can really see that this could be taken in a couple of different ways. Maybe they did have a guy named Ash, and maybe this was the scenario that played out, but it could be that it's implanted memories. It could be a lot of different things. But I think this is going to be really interesting to see how this plays out over the second half of the season, see what it is we're dealing with, because now we've got L'Rell and either Ash, who's clearly got some kind of brainwashing thing going on, or maybe even Volk in disguise on Discovery, and they're lost in space, and Lorca's got his own agenda, and Burnham's fallen for Ash, and and Stamets is losing his marbles. I mean, there's so much stuff that's going to be coming in the next half of the season. I'm excited.
Interesting.
And the other thing I wanted to talk to you guys about is I took the time to go back and rewind and write down what Stamets says when he's jumping, because I thought they were interesting, and I don't know what to make of them. So I'm going to read them for you guys, and we'll see if we can make sense of this. So the first time when he's doing his 133 jumps, he says, there's a clearing in the forest. That's how they go.
Right.
Which makes no sense now. I'm sure it will down the road, but that I don't know what to make of that at all. And then the second time when he's doing the trip that leaves them in the middle of nowhere, he says, I can see them all. Infinite permutations. It's magnificent.
Right. I thought that was talking about the multiverses.
Yeah. So I wonder if, what we know about that dark universe from our Star Trek original series and Deep Space Nine episodes is that that universe is militaristic, and they had some pretty nasty weapons there. So I wonder if Lorca's plan is to go to that alternate universe and load up and go back and win the war, or if he's, as someone else said earlier, going home.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. But it's interesting just on the whole subject of multiverses, in the time of, the late 60s in terms of fiction with the Mirror episode, you've got a sort of very binary type of universe. You've got the inside the Mirror universe where, Spock is evil and Kirk is evil, and there's the whole sort of they rise to power by assassinating their enemies and things like that, right? But if you look at some of the stories by Robert Heinlein where they have sort of like, and I think they talk about this on the Big Bang Theory with Sheldon, the fact that there are like six, because there's 3 dimensions, there's technically like 6 or 9, I forget what the number is, possible combinations of multiverses, which sort of opens, if you imagine like if you can imagine like flipping the axes around, from X, Y, and Z, you end up with 6 or 9 different permutations, as sort of like so that somewhere becomes a hub to these other places. Heinlein explores that in one of his books, with one of his Lazarus Long books, where at one point the universe is full of fictional characters, like you'd run into Batman and Robin and so on and so forth, and Will Robinson and William Shatner, or sorry, not William Shatner, but Kirk and stuff like that, right? In other universes, Britain is the superpower as opposed to America and things like that, like and they have ornithopters instead of airplanes and all these different kind of permutations, right? So this map that Lorca is looking at, that he's been mapping the sort of feedback from the jumps, I guess, right, sort of opens up this whole series of universes that are available to them, right? So kind of where did they end up? Did they end up in one of the ones that like I said, I missed it, but if he entered in coordinates for one that he knew existed, that's kind of where they've gone. But then he should know where they are when they land there, right? And he asks Saru,
yep,
where they are, right? The science officer, and he has no clue, right? So
yeah, I don't know. Again, I think I think we've all gone through these episodes together, and there's been some highs and some lows, but this was a pretty neat spot to jump off from, and perhaps even more than than I was at the beginning of for episode 1. I'm looking forward to see where they go from there.
Really? Okay.
Yeah, I think this was neat.
It's a good cliffhanger. It's and thankfully it's only until January 7th, 2018, when Despite Yourself will premiere. It's a little bit of a break. It's not quite the full summer break that you got for Best of Both Worlds Part 1.
Oh, yeah, that was such a long summer.
Is that the one where the Best of Both Worlds is the Borg one?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, right. Oh, interesting. Yeah. Wow.
Yeah, and it was also kind of a neat thing to see the Discovery, like what it can do in terms of battle. Like, granted, they weren't fighting very hard. It was mostly a distraction and data analysis and collection thing. But it was kind of cool watching it do its little spinny flip and fall down thingy and just appear all over the space around the sarcophagus.
Yeah.
Oh, and they also jump out of warp, right? They were running at warp 5, and they first jumped back to the planet in mid warp.
Yeah, that's true. They didn't stop the engines and then do the jump. They just jumped and were perfectly still when they came out. That's kind of interesting.
Right, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny because, obviously they had a different agenda, but even just that attack pattern scared the heck out of Cole, who was like, okay, you know what? Let's load this thing up. That's why Burnham has to start shooting up the bridge because, the attack pattern of them jumping and jiving and shooting and coming at them was really throwing them off their game.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
And Klingons don't jump.
Yeah.
And we didn't quite talk about it, but beyond the sort of first time we've ever seen topless Klingon women, we also had our first man-on-man romantic kiss in Star Trek.
Yeah.
I don't think there's ever been one before, and there may or may not have been a women one, but or at least like a with an intersex species or something. But this is like the first clear, these are both normal human beings sort of thing. So kudos to them for like making that first step.
And speaking of same-sex relations, that's the perfect segue, Jaime.
To
the Orville.
Yes, which was abounded with sexual positions and relations.
Yeah, and interspecies relations and all kinds of good stuff.
So who wants to take this one on? I can be real technical and say, well, the blue dude shows up again.
All right, well, I'll do this one. I had a good time with this one. So the larger part of this plot is that for this
was it actually Rob Lowe?
It was Rob Lowe.
Oh yeah, I totally thought it was. But then when I looked up on IMDb, I couldn't figure out who it was.
Yeah.
Okay, go ahead.
So this is the Orville episode 9, Cupid's Dagger. So the premise of the show is that the Orville is called in by Admiral Halsey to intercede in a dispute between the Navarians and the Bruidians, who are fighting over the planet Lipovius. Good job to whoever's naming everything this week. So they need the help of a forensic archaeologist to come on board and decide whose genetic ancestry this planet is belonging to. So trying to establish whether this belongs to the Navarians or to the Bruidians. And so shuttlecraft shows up on the ship. Out steps Rob Lowe as Derulio, who of course was a cameo in the first episode. Derulio is the blue gentleman who Kelly cheated with. Kelly, his first officer, his former wife, cheated on him with. So this leads to a pretty awkward situation on board the Orville, where Ed is ticked off to see this guy, obviously knowing what happened, as a result of that in the relationship. But Derulio actually turns out to be a pretty charming guy, and all of a sudden everybody starts warming up to him, and Kelly and he start hitting it off again, and next thing you know, he and Kelly end up in bed. And then we start seeing love spreading through the air all over the ship. People are starting to have these sort of unexpected relationships. We see Yaphet, the gelatinous crew member on the engineering crew, starts to woo Dr. Finn, who he's had eyes on for a few episodes now, and he shows up in sickbay with an acoustic guitar and a handful of flowers, singing Ramones tunes to her to try and pick her up, and somehow it works. He ends up hooking up with Dr. Finn, and then we end up with Ed starting to get jealous of Kelly's attention on Derulio, but it's not that he's jealous of Kelly. He's jealous because he wants to spend time with Derulio. So then he ends up asking Derulio out, which leads to one of the best and funniest parts of the series so far, in a conversation between Ed and Gordon, who asks the point blank question, do you want to bang Derulio? And so, of course, it turns out that Derulio's species, he's a Retepsian, his species goes into heat once a year, and they release pheromones, and the pheromones have gotten through contact onto Ed, onto Kelly, and onto Yaphet. And so all of these
played by Norm Macdonald, right?
Played by Norm Macdonald.
Canada's own Norm Macdonald.
Yep. And so they end up in this, crazy love triangle where the two of them end up, and of course, Ed asks Derulio out. They end up in bed together. And while this is going on, the two species, the Navarians and the Bruidians, are starting to fight over this planet, and things have gone awry. So they decide to use the Retepsian powers of pheromones to bring them closer together. So they have Derulio put his love spell on the two ambassadors, who end up falling in love and solving the conflict by holding hands onto the bridge and announcing that they're in love and they're getting married, and that will solve the conflict. And they order their sides to stand down. And Derulio reveals that they actually both shared the planet, the common ancestry, and they have to find a way to get over it in a typical sort of happy Star Trek ending. But it ends on a nice little cliffhanger too of was Derulio actually releasing pheromones? Is that why he got Kelly into bed the first time and why she cheated on Ed? He sort of says, maybe. So now we're sort of left with that. Well, Kelly started doubting, did she mean to cheat on Ed? Was it just something she couldn't avoid? So yeah, lots of stuff to unpack, but funny episode. Lots of funny stuff. My favorite line has to be, "You are a sexual jihadist," from Ed to Kelly, which is such a great line after he catches her in bed. Sorry, Jaime.
Sorry. I think for me, the one I liked was the interaction on the bridge between Gordon and Isaac, where Gordon's like, dude, like Captain Mercer's like really into Derulio. And Isaac's like, it's unclear. Please clarify. Has Captain Mercer been inside of Derulio? He's like, not yet, as far as I know. That's definitely some Seth MacFarlane human there. And also, I was really kind of impressed that we learned so much about Yaphet's species in what is like not a Yaphet episode, right? So we learned that much like Odo from Deep Space Nine, he has a bed instead of a bucket. He has like a flat, I don't know, like a sandbox. Yeah. But when he sand in it, he just sort of oozes himself into it as a liquid to let himself relax. We learned that he can stretch out parts of his body beyond just his arms. He can move his lips up to kiss the doctor. And then whatever, I don't even know how to describe it because I'm not, he does have a mouth of some sort. So it definitely is like an oral thing, but he like engulfs the entire, almost the entirety of the doctor as he's kissing her. We'll call it space
kissing her. Yeah, that's what he's doing. Yeah.
And we also learned that his species normally reproduces asexually, that they, what's he say, mitosis, I think?
Yeah,
so
mitosis,
his mother is his brother, sort of thing.
Yeah, and he got the looks.
Right.
Yeah, no, it was, there again, it was a funny episode right from the beginning where they start with a karaoke bar where they're all at their version of 10 Forward and they're, they set Bortus up to sing Celine Dion's My Heart Will Go On from Titanic. And he screams, "You will be silent," while they clap for him. We got a nice little cameo in there. I noted Canute, the weird karaoke host they have there. This huge purple guy was Ralph Garman, a podcaster, fellow podcaster, does Hollywood Babylon with Kevin Smith. I'm a fan of his, and so nice to see him get a cameo. He's a voice actor on Family Guy as well. So we've seen another Family Guy alumnus in there as well. So yeah, lots of fun. I think this was probably the best episode they did. It's got some of those great Star Trek things to balance things out. But just funny. Flat out, Rob Lowe was funny. The Yaphet stuff was funny. Ed was funny. Kelly was funny. Gordon got some great lines. I think it was a great episode.
Yeah, I think Rob Lowe was a good choice because he is a very charismatic sort of guy. So you can see how he fits in pretty well to this character. And relationship wise, they set up a couple interesting things in this episode. So at the very tail end, we talked about the fact that they're sort of, they have been sort of setting up the whole season that maybe Ed and Kelly would get back together. But this gives them a really good excuse in the future to say, hey, maybe it was an oopsie. I really wasn't myself. It was a chemical thing.
Yep. And I was waiting for all three of them to end up in bed together at some point.
Right.
All three of them?
Yeah. I really thought that's where that was going.
Yeah. And on the opposite end, they seem to be foreshadowing that Bortus and his husband will be breaking up at some point. Like they really hammered home the fact that they're having marital issues.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I wonder if that's part of their species though, right?
Yeah. It's funny to see the different dynamics because again, we're getting, I like that we got Ed having sex with Derulio and people weren't like, oh my God, you had sex with another male. They were just like, treating it like it was just another sexual relationship. They didn't blow it out because it was a gay relationship, and that's great. And in the same way, they're treating the relationship between Bortus and his husband as any normal relationship where, they're having marital problems and the husband's like, fine, I'll just go home and hang out with the kid. And I can't, they were complaining about their sex life a few weeks ago and they're not, they're not treating it with any kind of weird kid gloves or anything because it's a same-sex relationship. It's nice that it's not, being put in this weird, corner because it's something that's not, usually dealt with on sci-fi properly.
Sure. All right. Well, that's a good recap of that. You guys want to move on to the picks?
Sure.
All right. So Jaime, you got one pick.
One here, and it's a want to see sort of thing in that apparently Amazon is going to run a multi-season Lord of the Rings prequel TV series, presumably on their Prime Video channel. It's hard to get any sort of distinct information on this so far. It seems like it's more the Tolkien estate coming forward to Amazon with this thing, and I guess Amazon has apparently internally outbid a few other folks for this, but everyone would like to see this. I mean, it's been known for a long time that Amazon has been wanting its own Game of Thrones equivalent, and what better thing after Game of Thrones than Lord of the Rings? So hopefully they cover something that we haven't seen before, like stuff out of the Silmarillion or the unfinished sort of stuff that Tolkien had. There's multiple Bibles worth of content related to Lord of the Rings, or at least the realm of Lord of the Rings that they could play with without really sort of stomping all over what The Hobbit or the Lord of the Rings trilogy from Peter Jackson did.
Sure. And there's all kinds of nooks and crannies left over in the Lord of the Rings universe that they didn't even touch in the movies at all, right? So
yeah, a lot of side story they could go into if they wanted to.
Did you catch how much Amazon paid for just the rights?
I did not see the number.
$200 million.
Well, I was going to say $1 billion.
Yeah, $200 million just for the intellectual rights to be able to actually make the series. That's not including the cost of actually getting it up off the ground and making it. $200 million just to license the use of that world.
Wow.
Yeah, that's a couple bucks. Yeah.
It's amazing.
All right. So, Jonathan, you got the Punisher to talk to about?
Yeah, I got a couple picks. So the Punisher Netflix series starts this week. Again, it's kind of weird timing. Show that obviously, the part of the Marvel universe that's darker and edgier. The Punisher's not a superhero. He doesn't have special powers. He's just a guy with a bunch of guns who takes the law into his own hands, coming off of some of the tragedies we've seen in the world, particularly the United States of late, using gun violence. It's kind of a weird timing thing. And yet, I'm a longtime fan of the character. They've done some really interesting stories. I'm kind of curious to see where they go with this character on his own, and how they build off of where they left things off at the end of Defenders to sort of carry into the next phase of those Netflix series. So I'm keen to sort of see where they go next and where they take this character.
Yeah, and Jonathan, I think last time we talked about the Punisher, you had mentioned that that character came out during the Daredevil Marvel series.
Yeah, he was a significant part of the Daredevil second series on Netflix. So he starts off as sort of a villain and then sort of morphs into this sort of vigilante fighting for his own causes kind of thing towards the end. And actually you see him, strap on the skull t-shirt and start that sort of branded look of the Punisher towards the end of that series. So it'll be interesting to see where they go from leaving that character. And I know from watching the trailer for it, which we'll put up on our page, that we do see some familiar faces from the Daredevil series and from that Marvel Netflix collaborative series. There's some familiar faces for people who've been following that little pocket of the Marvel universe are going to turn up too. So it won't just be just the Punisher. It's going to be in that dark side of New York City, rooted in the on the streets version of Marvel's universe.
Right, the Hell's Kitchen area of New York. And the trailer, I haven't seen this trailer that you linked here, but previous trailers I saw, I think on Netflix itself, made it look like it was going to be sort of origin story heavy, or at least from the beginning piece. So it sounds like it dovetails timeline-wise into that part of the Daredevil part of the series. Yeah,
I think they're going to go back and sort of explore some of the, how a man gets to this place. And, the thing is, you can't, when he first premiered in Marvel Comics in the 70s, he was this sort of merciless, killer of villains kind of character. But you can only do that for so long. You need to find some dimensions. And they did a good job of that in the Daredevil series. And hopefully they'll continue to try and build the fact out of, what drives a man to this place. Obviously we've established from the comics years ago, it was, his family was slain and he was on a pursuit of vengeance. But, there's got to be more to it to keep that kind of person driving to the next thing and the next thing and the next thing. So it'll be interesting to see how they keep that motivation up and make this a compelling character in a world where, a guy walking down the street with a gun shooting at people is not not necessarily going to be the most popular series on its own merits. So
right.
And so my other pick for this week is a book. So this week we're going to see the release of Artemis, the new book by Andy Weir, who's the author of The Martian, which of course was made into a feature film, a Matt Damon film. Was it last year or the year before? But a really good adaptation of a really good book. I think I know Tim, you had read it as well. I don't know if you read it, Jaime, but a good book. So the plot of this one is I'm told something about a crime thriller set on the moon. So I'm looking forward to diving into this and taking a look to see what kind of follow up that Andy Weir can come up with, having enjoyed that sort of look at the scientific / adventuring world of The Martian. So
yeah, he did science the crap out of that story.
Oh, there was a lot of sciencing.
I saw a couple of interviews with him, Martin Weir or Andy Weir, talking about the creation of The Martian story itself. So was The Martian his first book? You know,
I don't actually. Now that you mention it,
I see all the books by Andy Weir. Let's click on that link there.
Well, I'm looking at the little bit shorter description on Amazon, which will give you the synopsis here. So Jazz Bashara is a criminal. Well, sort of. Life in Artemis, the first and only city on the moon, is tough if you're not a rich tourist or an eccentric billionaire. So smuggling in the occasional harmless bit of contraband barely counts, right? Not when you've got debts to pay and your job as a porter barely covers the rent. Everything changes when Jazz sees the chance to commit the perfect crime with a reward too lucrative to turn down. But pulling off the impossible is just the start of her problems as she learns that she stepped square into a conspiracy for control of Artemis itself, and that now her only chance of survival lies in a gambit even riskier than the first. Available on hardcover for $17.56 or Kindle for $13.99 US.
Yeah, and it'll be on, I'm sure, Audible very soon too, which is probably how I'll consume it, given my daily commute. And it says actually on here, Tim, on Penguin Random House's site, that The Martian was his first novel, so this is his second.
Right. Yeah.
So it'll be interesting to see if he can follow up such a strong debut.
Yeah, for sure. All right. Okay. Well, I guess that's it for the week, and the guys, eh? So, all right. So, Jaime, if people want to find you on the interwebs, where do they look?
I'm on Twitter as @DevWithTheHair.
Okay, and Jonathan, where would people find you?
I'm on Twitter as @JPK News.
All righty. And, of course, I am Timitra, TIMMITRA, and you can find me on the Twitterverse as well. So, until next week, we'll say adieu.
Goodbye.
Bye. Did you say goodbye, Jonathan?
I did.
I didn't hear you.
Goodbye!
If you want to find out more about the podcast or see episode show notes, visit the Spockcast website at spockcast.com. You can get in touch with us on the website or follow us on Twitter @SpockCast. If you have feedback or questions, send us a tweet with the hashtag AskSpockcast. If you like the show, please consider recommending us to a friend, writing a review on iTunes, or pledging any amount on patreon.com/Spockcast. You can find out details on how to help us out on our website at Spockcast/sponsor us. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you in the future.
Yeah, I mean, I think we just have to agree what we're going to watch as we go, so that we can all make sure we're on the same page. But I mean, we've got
there's Doctor Who to start watching.
Well, there's the Doctor Who Christmas special coming up. It's on Christmas Day. There'll be the Christmas episode, and that'll be the debut of the new Doctor, which is kind of cool.
Yeah, I've been watching Mr. Robot, and there's a couple of other shows I was thinking.
I'm caught up on Stranger Things. We could get into Stranger Things.
Right. Okay, yeah.
We'll have Justice League for next week. Are you going to go see that this week? On the weekend, Jaime?
Ooh, that's a good question. I will see it again. Oh, sorry. I was also looking at the new Doctor Who's costume. It says how Doctor Who's new costume cleverly leans on history.
Yeah.
It means nothing to me, but it does look very kind of retro.
Yeah.
Even to my eyes. So cool. Yeah. When does Doctor Who come out?
Well, Christmas Day is the special, right?
Christmas Day. Okay.
They always do a Christmas episode, and you never know which Doctor is going to end up on it. But we know it's Capaldi for sure this time.
Yeah. Okay. But it'll be the transformation episode.
Okay, so I'll
you think so?
probably be on break when that happens. Okay, because I'll be doing holiday travel, so we'll figure it out then. But it sounds like we've got other sci-fi that
sure.
Next week we can definitely do Orville and maybe Stranger Things, and then we'll sort of see what we have on tap for that. We could touch on Justice League if you get a chance to see it, Jaime, and otherwise Tim and I can work on our spoiler-free review for you.
Sure. So when is Thanksgiving for you guys? Is it this weekend or next weekend?
Next week.
Yeah, Thursday.
Next week.
Oh, that's a good point. You know what? I will need to check my calendar before I commit.
Okay.
I was about to make a grand proclamation. I was like, I will commit to seeing Justice League. I'm like, wait a minute, what do I have to do on Friday? Yes, I am off on Friday. I will go see Justice League if I can. I'll go see like a really awkward time, like noon or something when everybody else is up.
Right.
I'll go check it out. That way we can all talk about that next week.
Yeah, well, you better maybe you should buy your ticket in advance because I'm sure all the other people doing podcasts are going to watch it on Friday at noon.
Oh, they're all waiting for the Rotten Tomatoes review.
Hey, how do we get ourselves into those preview things that they do with the press junkets?
Oh yeah,
I went to one with you before when you were at the Star, but
yeah. Well, I could start making phone calls if we're ready to start expanding our purview.
Our repertoire.
I got a couple people.
Yeah, and Tim, you can take an Uber there and a Lyft.
Yeah, we'll talk about that in a few minutes.
You can skate between them, sort of Van Damme style, if you want.
Yeah, no, I don't do Lyft. I don't do Uber, like I told you, right? So
we're gonna see you on Thursday night. You're gonna make it to this one?
Who, me?
Yes, you.
Not me.
Oh,
I'm going to Toronto.
No, I'm taking transit. No, I have a sleep study between now and then. I got like hours and hours of fun ahead of me.
Yeah. Well, I have your nephew on standby. He came and filled your seat for Thor. So.
Oh, did he? Oh, good. Okay, at least it didn't go to waste.
Yeah. No, I mean he lives in the neighborhood. I told him if you can get to the theater in 20 minutes, you can have Tim's ticket to Thor. He was like, all right.
No. Okay. Cool.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
Anyway, all right. I'll talk to you guys later.
All right.
Talk to you later.
Bye.
See you guys.
Littleton Coin Company is ringing in the holiday season with daily deals. Visit littletoncoin.com for at least 15% off select products now through November 28th. Save on your favorite coins, such as Morgan Silver Dollars, Kennedy Half Dollars, commemorative quarters, and much more. But hurry, each day offers a new deal you don't want to miss. Visit us now at littletoncoin.com. That's littletoncoin.com. Littleton Coin Company, serving collectors since 1945.